Howdy, everybody. You're with us at Cyberhuman Frontiers on our brave and continuing intrepid trek into the future. We do not claim to give medical, legal, political, or financial advice, and we offer our content for your entertainment. The points of view and purpose here is not to incite fear or violence or harass in any way, but to share opinions and thoughts with other like-minded individuals curious about the subject at hand. This encourages conversation and awareness, the exchange of knowledge amongst people in our communities and extended communities. The opinions expressed here belong solely to the people expressing them and are not a representation of the channel Cyberhuman Frontiers. We would like to just refer you to the Copyright Act of 1976, which encompasses our ability to include and incorporate works from other content creators and other lectors and presenters for the purpose of education. I want to just hit on a couple of things that are sort of important to keep in mind and to kind of keep the relevance of the big picture as we dive into the deep details of certain things, which we will be doing tonight. Electromagnetic waves and their interaction with things like organisms' brains and nervous systems. To reiterate something that I've touched on a couple times in previous episodes, in this tangible world, we get to know that world by way of what our senses input to our brains. And that's how we know or think that we know everything about the environment around us. But now enter the age of advanced and highly powerful technology for the purpose of virtualization. And now there's more and more of both an opportunity and a hazard to have absorbed something by way of our senses that might or might not have been something real, but may have been synthesized, and which we can't differentiate between whether that's real or synthesized. We still have the internal consciousness of our mind to be able to make that discernment. But what would happen if, by way of some further advancement of technology, it was possible to start altering what the perceptive sense was within the brain? And one might attempt to process it internally, but one's thoughts might have been altered or coerced or intercepted and replaced by something else that now takes away the ability for us to actually really know anything. So it's really an amazing time that we're living in from the technological standpoint, and with tremendous possibilities for an amazing future. There also come tremendous hazards along with it. So I want you to keep in mind, we'd definitely like you to keep in mind that we have to find a place in our minds to be able to contemplate and reflect. And I suggest something that sounds as crazy as the ability to get away from all inputs of technology, to find a safe sanctum somewhere where you can avoid all of that input and just see what your consciousness tells you. That might become more important as we go forward, because, as we've said, there are so many new advances that now they're promising to be able to either supplement, augment, or replace what was one's previously sovereign internal conscious perception with something else. And we don't exactly know where that's going to lead. TMC, any initial thoughts on that? Just things to keep in mind as we go forward here.
No, I think that you and I need to be mindful about the order in which we showcase information, because there's a few different fields of study that are coalescing at this point. Right. Yep. And out of it, we're going to get the new internet. And these technologies really function in the tech space, what we understand as cell phones and wearables, and that's already into the nanotechnology scale. And then you have the medicine application or medical applications using various forms of no contact, directed, focused, modulated energy.
Yep.
And
And there's a whole subfield, which we're not getting into tonight, which is the whole business of genetic modification, splicing, substituting, reprogramming. We're not talking about that tonight, but we have in previous episodes. There's been an odyssey of related subject matter that you can take advantage of in our archives of shows. But that's a huge piece as well, the medical applications and all of that stuff.
Essentially, what I think we're going to talk about is a little bit of the medical piece and illustrate how the technology piece, which is two of the three, and the third piece, you have medicine, technology, and you have neuroscience. And these three fields are coalescing and are now, as you said, Indy, it's a great word, converged to a point where we are embarking on a whole new type of internet experience. And I'm using air quotes with my claw hands. I hope we get to look at one of the many patents that Miss Elizabeth Rauscher has filed, who is no longer here. And I'm anxious to see what you have.
Let me just go a little bit further on that whole idea of virtualization. All right, I'm sure most of us are aware that now with CGI or CGA, let's call it computer generated animation, it's possible to create basically out of just some templates something that you'll see visually at 4K resolution that looks like something. It looks real. But it was actually manufactured. It was actually created and animated in such a way that a designer did it. Every single pixel of the picture, and remember, it's a moving picture at somewhere in the range of 30, 60 frames per second, is being defined and engineered to be a certain color in a certain place at a certain time. That's pixels. Now at 4K, there's a whole lot of pixels. And now run that at something that is faster than the eye can see the separate flickering of frames at 30 frames per second, let's say, all right? And the amount of processing that's being done there by the modern computers that we have is really fantastic. It's huge. And what your resultant image is something that looks utterly, absolutely real. And it can be modified, it can be augmented, it can be changed by way of merging together a couple different sections of media in your computer equipment. Millions of pixels going by per second. Exactly how hard do you think it would be to sample, monitor, and pick up, let's say, 10 or 20 of a person's brain waves, patterns, and intercept them, substitute them, modify them, or entrain that brain with something else that was for the purpose of modifying the conscious state of the individual, relatively speaking, versus computer generated animated graphics. That's not really as hard to do. To apply that kind of computing power to something like the brainwave patterns of an organism. So that just gives you a little bit of an idea of what is possible. If we can do what we can do with animated pictures, so nobody can tell the difference that it was built in some sort of a graphics lab. Well, just think, it's amazing. Does that make any sense to you, TMC, as I try to bring that little comparison to light? And just to
really, I think to say it as simply as possible, the human organism is now, from a scientific perspective, studied and understood enough such that it can be looked at as a biologic complex circuit board.
Yes.
And so we are biological cell phones or biological automated vehicles like a Tesla, but in a biological form. We don't travel 60, 80, 100 miles an hour. We walk at 4 miles an hour, but we're also very good hunters, and we have fairly good eyesight, and we can hear pretty well, and we can build things with our hands and our fingers and our minds. That is what is sought after. That is the final frontier. Understanding and mastering the human organism, most specifically the brain, because the brain drives all functions. It is the interface and the intermediary between the consciousness and how that consciousness decides to manifest whatever it is someone wants to do with their time and their energy. That is the coup de grace, the holy grail. And that will be what is fought over in the cyber domain with the new networks that are now online.
Right. We're talking about people's ability to consciously decide what they're going to do with every single minute of their day and how they arrive at those decisions and choices. And if at any point in time that sovereignty is interfered with or invaded upon, well, then, really, upon what are we basing every one of those daily decisions that we're making? And were they our own, or were they replaced? Were they augmented, supplemented? We can be augmented by technology too, and amazing, wonderful things can happen. But what I keep coming back to is two words. And I wish I didn't see it any other way. And I guess for entertainment purposes only, I'll say it seems to keep coming back to invasion and control. So enhancement and augmentation, or invasion and control. Which way is it going to go? Now, enter in another little piece, and let me just pop this down so you can see the title here. And when you combine some of the advanced hardware technology and some of the advanced interface technology, now enter in the other piece. Envision artificial intelligence, which is something that is a program that was written by some people, a group of people, software engineers. Imagine a time when artificial intelligence is able to write its own programs. And I just want to give you a little, this is not a real long video. Just want to give you a little bit of a sample of some of what just imagine if that were possible, because we're on the forefront of that too, where we got computers that we can build and incorporate into them a certain amount of software, and that software has instructions built into it to be adaptive and to be evolving all by itself. You just keep putting power to that thing and connect it to a network, and who knows what it's going to do. So anyway, you might find this a little bit interesting. So the title of this is From Essays to Coding, and this is from Cold Fusion. And here we go. See what you think of this. Just fascinating stuff, but a little scary.
Welcome to another episode of Cold Fusion. A couple of episodes ago, we took a look at how AI was becoming creative. If you liked it, you're going to be fascinated with today's one. We'll be diving into some very interesting stuff. In December of 2017, a group of researchers asked themselves, will AI be writing most of the computer code out there? They estimated that this could happen by 2040. The thing is, we may be already seeing the start of that. We've previously talked about AutoML by Google, an AI that can write computer code. But this next AI is a step above that, just in terms of how general it seems. But there may be some things going on below the surface, and we'll get into that in the second half of this episode.
Guys, 2040 is way off. Way off. TMC, you want to chime in?
Yeah, it's already.
Okay. Yeah. 2040, right out the window. Guys, strap your seatbelts on for 2025.
So let's take a look.
You are watching Cold Fusion TV.
GPT-3, or Generative Pre-trained Transformer 3, is a deep learning algorithm that produces human-like text. It's the third-generation language prediction model created by San Francisco startup OpenAI, which was co-founded by Elon Musk. This program is better than any prior program at producing text which could have been written by a human. The reason that this is such a breakthrough is that it may prove useful to many companies and has great potential in automating tasks. Just imagine an AI that can write anything. You feed it poems from a particular poet, and it will write a new one with the same rhythm and genre. It can write news articles, like this one published by The Guardian. Yes, this news article was produced by an AI. It can write computer code in any language. It can read an article, answer questions from the information in the article, and even summarize that article for you. Not to mention, it can also generate pictures from text. Some of these things aren't new by themselves, but doing all...
Okay, so I'm going to definitely let him continue on with this, but extrapolate to last week's episode, okay, when we were talking about human bond communication. And let's take two steps. So we're talking about computers that can generate text and can absorb the sentiment and tone and intonation and everything and do a virtualization. You'd never be able to tell whether it was the original poet or something artificially generated. Now, scale it up to something graphic. Scale it up to a virtual representation of a person that you're communicating with over the internet. And now envision that that's an avatar. Now envision that avatar is of a deceased person, but it's such an accurate avatar. It's like a complete replica. And
think of it, can I interrupt real quick? For those of you that are kind of understanding what Indy's saying, what he's getting at as an avatar is this idea of having a phone call or a FaceTime chat, a video chat with somebody. But when they, reach out because they want to touch your face or pat your shoulder or give you a kiss, that can all be simulated where your nerves are artificially stimulated and you get a pursing of the lips that is a translation over the internet as a kiss, or you get a pat on the back, or your shoulder, certain tendons or muscles, certain specific muscle
body
spindle
language.
fibers will contract, and it will feel like something like a twitch or just a little nudge or whatever, and that can be a form of communication. Now, I'll stop there. Go ahead, Indy.
Well, all right. So we're talking about highly accurately virtualizing text so that you could never tell it wasn't the poet. Now let's highly virtualize an interaction. Combine that with what we were discussing last week in human bond communication and that little pie chart of human emotions, which can be graphically quantified in terms of brainwave patterns, and imagine that now that is something that can be virtualized so precisely and so accurately that you'd never know that they weren't the other person's actual emotions of whichever part of that spectrum might be, from happiness to sadness. And imagine that now those could actually be transplanted into yourself. So this whole idea of virtualization and computer processing to create all of this is like a whole new kind of artificial reality, which can be so precise and so accurate, you would never know that it wasn't real at any level, whether it be emotional, physical, virtual, visual, or just reading a poem that's from a deceased poet from long ago. And boy, those new poems that came out from that computer-generated, synthesized new version of that deceased poet are perfect. All that stuff. And how's it going to happen? AI is becoming more and more capable of doing it and automating it for us or for whoever runs it.
I can show you an article right now that illustrates Huawei and Apple and AI kind of all fusing together to corner the market.
Let's do it. We'll get to the last of this guy's video after that.
Yeah. Let me dig it real quick. I've got it right here. Keep going, Indy. I lost it.
That's okay.
It goes down a tab, dude. Let me find it real fast. I literally just read it like 2 minutes ago.
I'll run a little bit more of this. So the deal is, it's absolutely fascinating, and it's downright wild. It's science fiction. Back to this.
All these things under the same algorithm is pretty impressive. The internet is buzzing with its release. David Chalmers, an Australian philosopher, described GPT-3 as, quote, one of the most interesting and important AI systems ever produced. A review in Wired said that GPT-3 was, quote, provoking chills across Silicon Valley. The National Law Review said GPT-3 is, quote, an impressive step in the larger process towards a more general intelligence. Instead of just talking about it, let me show you. Here are some examples of beta testers on Twitter putting the AI through its paces. Here it is writing some Java code just when given a text description. How about making a mock-up website by just copying and pasting a URL with a description? In this example, it finished writing an essay on how to run an effective board meeting. The results were so good that the user actually plans on using it. In this next example, after receiving the input of a complicated explanation of Bitcoin, the AI summarizes it and explains it in simple terms. Here, it demonstrates some understanding of objects. It can even explain computer code back to you in plain English, or even suggest improvements. Or, how about building a machine learning model just by describing the dataset and required output? No coding required. What about a Turing test? AI.
Apply that to genetic engineering. Apply that to knowing what you want as a desired output and just giving it the initial data set.
Usually struggles at common sense, but GPT-3 flies through these examples. In this example, you can see that it possesses some comprehension. How about taking this a step further? What about an imaginary conversation between a Twitter user and Einstein? I'll read some of it to you. Twitter user Manuel: Albert Einstein, nice to meet you. I'm Manuel Arreos, and I've come from the future to meet you. Einstein laughs.
Oh, really? How is the future?
It's amazing, actually. What year is this?
It's 1947. It's January. This is Princeton, New Jersey. You're in America.
Your name is Albert Einstein, right?
That's correct.
Do you mind if I ask you a few questions for a book I'm writing? It's about the great minds of our times.
I guess I can spare a few minutes.
Thanks so much.
Go ahead. Ask me whatever you want.
What are you doing here in Princeton, in the US? You were born in Germany, right?
Yes, I was born in Germany, but I was also born Jewish, and the Nazis were coming to power, so I fled here to the United States.
How do you like it here?
It's amazing. I'm so proud of being able to contribute to science and help humanity.
And it goes on. But when he starts talking about concepts within physics, that's when it gets especially interesting. It's surprisingly coherent. I'll leave a link to the full interview below.
I'll pause it right there. Pretty amazing that the computer is embodying Albert Einstein's background, experience, knowledge base, life history, and is literally carrying on a conversation with anybody who would want to carry that conversation on. There are apps and programs that we use here and now practically every day that incorporate some elements of artificial intelligence in them, and they're becoming better and better and better. What you're seeing here is what was the forefront of what these people at Cold Fusion were describing about 6 months ago. And TMC, did you find that thing you were looking for?
I sure did. Yeah, so there's this article in Forbes, and it was a little while ago, and I'm finding the right tab. Bear with me here.
Yep.
Yeah, this is the one. So this article in Forbes, it talks about, this is in August 15, 2020. Goodbye, Google. Huawei is now urgently turning to Apple. And what this article talks about is this idea of Huawei trying to create its own ecosystem, like Apple, in order to circumvent what was the temporary restrictions that were placed on Huawei by the Trump administration. That has now expired. And through the course of the last few years, Huawei had to reshape their business model to try to encompass as much of the market as they can to create an ecosystem primarily in Europe. Their main foreign market at this point, at least what this article talks about, is Europe and the UK. And this idea of AI seamlessly understanding what you're doing, where you are, how you're feeling, what you want, from the temperature to hydration to what you want on TV, everything. And it's this whole Chinese social credit score model idea that then is embedded into the app ecosystem. This article talks about Huawei committing 3 billion with a B, bravo, to the world in order to allow app developers in the iOS and Android space to be able to build their apps and patch their apps so that it is interoperable with Huawei's AI 5G ecosystem.
Yeah.
And this document talks about a lot of those pieces without a whole lot of detail, and is really illustrating where the wars are happening in this industry, in this market space. And Huawei is a major Western competitor, and the strategies that they're using to penetrate markets range from simply selling handsets to selling and providing free apps like TikTok, up to and including backhaul core carrier grade telecommunications infrastructure that range from massive amounts of MIMO antennas, multiple input, multiple output antennas that do things like three-dimensional NR beamforming, which is a complicated way of saying that they can create a bubble that is not really like a cloud, but more like a spotlight. In between a spotlight and a laser pointer, they can make beams of electromagnetic energy and point them up, down, left, right, forward, and back, and also modulate the power, the density of the power field, the power density field,
right,
of each of those beams. And that's the backhaul, commercial grade, carrier grade stuff that will work whether or not you have a Huawei phone or some other type of phone. Having said that, Huawei is not the only one that's doing it. This is 5G and on.
I'm glad you said that. Yep.
Yeah. This complex electromagnetic communication systems that have been adopted or retooled from military grade technologies that function in the radar space, that function in the direct and energy space, and function in the intelligence space. So all of these technologies that have been built and perfected, that the militaries around the world have been using on each other for the last 50 years, are now being commercialized and put into the consumer space under the guise of AI, automation, energy and green opportunities, and increased global safety and security. And we see that through things like Apple and Google merging together their AI databases through the contact tracer apps, and this idea of big tech and big telecom being separate and segmented away from government, such that companies like Facebook, Google, Amazon, Twitter, Microsoft, and telecoms that have international partnerships all function independently and collectively as multinational corporations who are essentially above the law. And what I mean by that is this: you can take information from one of your main data centers and move it to another data center, and it's still your responsibility. You're still within legal guidelines to do whatever you need to do with that information. Now, when it comes to managing and understanding something like the Constitution and Bill of Rights, if you happen to need to use something, some piece of hardware, and you're a company like Facebook, and you need to use a piece of hardware that happens to be over in China, but it's to provide good service to your American customers, what's stopping Facebook from pumping all of its American information over through the China computers and then back to the United States so that the user could have a nice, cool AI experience? And what I'm getting at is this: when these multinational corporations set up businesses and set up deals in countries like China, in countries like Iran, in countries like India, Pakistan, anywhere in Europe, Russia, and on and on and on, they are not subjected to the same rules and restrictions that exist here in the United States, even though they are a U.S.-based company. And here's where the sticky part comes into play. When you start looking at authorizations for pulling FISAs and for pulling signals intelligence information, it specifically states American-based companies who do business in other countries are subjected to that type of scrutiny. And this is where we have a major fracture between the government and big tech and big telecom. We have competing governments that are essentially destroying the middle class of every country in the world, known as the Great Reset. So I'll stop there. Go ahead, Indy.
That's great. Other little pieces related but not directly related. How many people read the fine print? If you want to use an app or a device, actually read the fine print of that use agreement. You sign off on it. Well, once you've done that, I think it's pretty obvious that to many of us, it would be pretty obvious that you really have signed away your ownership of your own privacy, because usually contained in there somewhere is once whatever you've conveyed to them goes out into their equipment and their servers, it's under their control. Would you add anything to that before I go back to the rest of this video? Slightly different subject, but sort of on the same line of not having full control over what's going on around us.
That's just it. They've created an ecosystem that everybody is now used to and comfortable with using, that is now a dependency, whereby you are not able to maximize your time, your money, and your value without functioning in the digital space. And the digital spaces that have monopolistic control are exercising totalitarian techniques, authoritarian mechanisms that do things like alter an election.
Yep.
And it's treason.
Yep. One good example. Another little thing here. Oracle Google copyright case of the century, kicking off in the Supreme Court. That was October 7th, 2020. So this is now by way of review. And let's just give this a quick listen.
News less dry and boring. Last week, I found out about the ongoing battle between Google and Oracle. It's a $9 billion copyright dispute, and it's been called the copyright case of the century. And I would have had no idea about it if not for Morning Brew. If you want to keep up to date with today's fast pace of news and don't have the time to go through multiple news sources, Morning Brew is a great way to get the most out of your time if you're into science, technology, or business. It's completely free and takes less than 15 seconds to subscribe. Click the link in the description below to subscribe to Morning Brew today. Okay.
I don't mind giving these guys an opportunity to do a little plug for what they're doing. They are, without knowing it, kindly allowing us to replay some of their content, and that's fine. So they promote Morning Brew. That's there for you, among many other things. Go ahead. Yep. Well, sorry.
I'm gonna send you a link here real quick, and it's from USA Today.
This came in.
Yeah, it talks about the CEO dying after taking a leave of absence. This is the CEO of Oracle back in October of 2019. I don't know what the date was on the article that the guy was talking about in the video, because I turned away to find this, but I remember hearing a story not too long ago where this dude from Oracle, some really, really bad, crazy stuff happened to this guy that was completely out of character. And from what I heard, this was a podcast when I was listening to, they were talking about it, and they were talking with the family, and none of what the reports said made sense. And so anyway, this is how real world stuff works, folks. When Google doesn't like you and wants to take over your market share, they'll just off the CEO because they don't give a shit.
Just kind of an odd coincidence that right while that contentious legal battle was taking place, that a very short time after that, the CEO of Oracle, Mark Hurd, just happened to die. Yep. Yeah. Things like this happen. A lot. Anyway.
This article is just a puff piece, but it was the first one I found that's relevant to... Anyway, I saw that flash across the screen with the video playing and felt this is prudent because it's very important for everybody to understand that law enforcement and the court systems are broken. they're broken. And so stuff like this happens and nobody's held accountable. How many people are walking around right now that shouldn't be? I'm talking high rollers. I'm talking heads of state kind of stuff. High rollers. How many of them are walking around? How many of them are currently serving in an official federal capacity who should be at a minimum detained before, they're given their due process? And I'll stop there.
I almost
you are currently serving.
I almost don't dare to specify a number, but I'm the number that popped into my mind was 25 to 40%. It's shocking. But if you look at what happens when we see things that should be brought to either the light of illumination or prosecuted, or people brought up on charges and it doesn't happen, it really kind of proves TMC's point that our judicial system is rather broken. Yeah. Anyway, let's see what this guy's got next here. Curious.
Build websites just from a description. Answer common sense questions. Assume the personality of Einstein and have a conversation. Explain complicated things in simple terms. Explain computer code to you in plain English. Or build faces from a text description. So what is going on here, and how does this
build faces from a text description? Woo! Nifty.
all work? GPT-3 is a massive neural network that has the capacity of 175 billion machine learning parameters. It was trained on hundreds of billions of words, including books, Wikipedia, and the general web, which includes coding. The training data is all-encompassing and doesn't require further training for specific language tasks. In other words, it can apply what it's learned to many other things without human supervision.
This is as of a year ago. Hundreds of billions of words.
This is just public a year ago, buddy.
This is what was public a year ago. Right. Wild stuff, man.
Yeah.
10 times bigger than the previous largest language learning model, which was made by Microsoft in February 2020. As a general rule, the larger the number of parameters, the more accurate the AI. For text,
you want to really blow your mind? We aren't even talking about the large-scale deployment of quantum computers yet, but we're talking orders of magnitude of gigaflops of computation per second.
Petaflops.
That's even more. Not gig. Right.
Peta.
That's beyond. Is that beyond exaflops?
It's I have no clue, bro. The largest term I've heard used in terms of information over time, is petaflops.
Okay. So it kind of goes like this: mega, giga, tera, exa, peta. For anybody who's interested, those are the terms for the multipliers, and each one of them is an order of 1,000 times more than the previous. So 1,000 megabytes is 1 gigabyte. 1,000 gigabytes is 1 terabyte, et cetera. Top one, at least at this point in time, being petaflops, which is like, it's just a lot.
GPT-3 calculates how likely one word is to appear in a text, given the other words in the text. This is what is known as the conditional probability of words. For example, in the sentence, I wanted to go for a jog, so I went to get my blank. The blank can be filled with any word. There are countless possibilities, but from what the AI has learned, it thinks that the probabilities of shoes being the next word of the sentence is higher than the word chicken, for example. In September of 2020, Microsoft announced that it had licensed the exclusive use of GPT-3. The public can still use it to receive an output, but only Microsoft has control of the source code. I'm not sure how I feel about that.
Were you saying something?
Yeah, I want to still share real fast, dude.
I just wanted to mention something. You're seeing this stuff appearing under test purposes. My email program is becoming more and more intelligent by the day because they have incorporated, and I'm sure you guys have this in your programs as well, autofill, where it predicts what word, the next word it is that you're going to want to fill in. And they're kind of offering it to me while testing it on me and you and everybody else. And of course, it's tracking what typical words I choose, and it's becoming more precise in being able to finish drafting the remainder of sentences that I am writing when I choose to draft and generate an email to somebody. So it's really being tested and used. It's growing. It's learning now. So how long will it be before that system, in my very own humble little email program, is able to draft the whole letter that I didn't even write yet? See what I'm saying?
Yep.
Cool. But don't I want to write my own letters? But
yeah, I think they'll showcase a thought to text technology before too awful long, and that'll basically be the icebreaker to the new types of internet. Because Microsoft was being talked about and their new AI system, and they're the only ones with that access to the source code and blah blah blah. I found this the other day, and I wanted to share it. We had talked earlier, you and I, about maybe talking about AI, and so far this has really been a very interesting conversation. IBM and Microsoft are really two entities of the same main body. Microsoft is really a spin-off at IBM. IBM's been around over in Europe, and they're the ones that are responsible for barcoding the Jews. It was known as the Watson machine to track and catalog the Jews after they were barcoded. And IBM is still using Watson as a name. And in this case, it's Watson Artificial Intelligence Lab in a partnership with MIT. Keep in mind, the Watson computers were the computers IBM used to barcode and decide which Jews were murdered. And now, Watson Artificial Intelligence Lab is partnering IBM and MIT together, and IBM being a sister or brother affiliate to Microsoft. And oh yeah, these groups are neck deep in the backhaul architectures of our telecommunications infrastructure. I have seen it with my own eyes. These types of programs are responsible for routing technicians when they go about their day. So an outside technician who has to go fix a phone line or a cable line or whatever, at this point, the dispatch departments and the work order departments feed their information through stuff like what you're seeing on the screen, and the computer tells the technician which order to do their jobs based on a variety of factors, to the extent that where I used to work, the managers were getting in trouble for deviating from the automated system. They were actually being reprimanded and up to termination for trying to find better ways to be more efficient because the system had just come online. And what the system is designed to do is automate the dispatch process so that technicians, and I say this from personal experience, and it's important because this is going to go across all municipalities and all utilities. What it's going to ultimately do is automate dispatch and automate materials to be sent to technicians or to workforces without the need for people to manage and supervise. The computer, the Chinese social credit score model, will be the technocratic, positronic babysitter that will be your new boss. And it will be done through systems like what you're seeing on the screen.
Extrapolate. Look what this means. The penalty for deviating from what the system is telling you to do. Termination, reprimand. Punishment.
I've been personally counseled on deviating away from what the AI system told my technicians to do.
Wow.
Yeah. And I had the area I was responsible for, it was a rural area. So a technician would drive an hour to get to a job. So what we were seeing was a technician from an hour and a half away crossing another technician, driving in opposite directions of each other to go to jobs where if a human would have done that, they would have taken the technician nearest to where the job was and put them there. But the AI system actually had technicians in the vehicles driving for longer periods of time, and nobody knew why. Nobody could explain it. The only answer was, don't worry about it. follow directions, get back in line. Anyway, you can have share back.
Wow. Wow. All right, I'll do that. It's chilling. There's so much more of the chilling apprehension that I get than I get of the fascinating wonderment of it all.
I got more.
Yeah, I found it.
Got like 500 tabs.
I found so many tabs. we read so much. We have, wow. I even resorted to printing some stuff on actual paper with an actual printer so that I could hold it in my hands. It's kind of an old novelty now, but anyway, all right, back to this.
OpenAI has made GPT-3 a cloud-based service and has opened it to beta testers since July. OpenAI claims that it's done this to both limit bad actors and to make a profit. It's obvious that this technology could simplify work and amplify productivity for a lot of small and medium businesses. Even large companies could see a benefit. OpenAI has gotten tens of thousands of applicants, all of them knocking down the door to get access to the AI. OpenAI is being cautious about access. They say that they're not sure what this could do when it's released into the real world. Pricing for an eventual commercial service is still to be determined. The quality of this text generated by the AI can be so high that it's difficult to distinguish from that of a human. This has both benefits and risks. 31 OpenAI researchers and engineers warned of GPT-3's potential dangers and called for research to mitigate the risk. They cited harmful effects and consequences including misinformation, fake news articles, social engineering, spam, phishing.
Let all of those things sink in just for a second. This is one of those pregnant pauses. Misinformation, phishing.
Is that her name? I said, is that her name?
Yeah.
Misinformation.
And fraudulent academic essay writing. I could already see a bunch of students bluffing their way through university with such a tool. If you're in the School of Languages, just give the assignment to the AI to read and ask it to write an essay for you and then modify if needed. There's even been a case of a university student who used the AI to automatically write blog entries under a fake name. The blog garnered some interest and some people even subscribed to it, believing it was a human. Some of the writing was so good that it reached the top spot in Hacker News. More recently, some Reddit users were fooled by the AI for more than a week. After seeing all of this, some of you might be scared, others.
Can you guys, you folks out there, can you please just extrapolate? We're only talking about text and that type of communication, but all you really need to do is scale it up to some of those other virtualizations. That's all you need to do. The computing power is there.
There's a lot of people that are real familiar with a very, very recent famous psychological operation. And the point of saying that is this: psychological operations in the digital space have been ongoing for a long, long time. And to your point, Indy, it's way beyond voice and text. Way beyond voice and text.
Just know it, understand it, realize it, and deal with it. And be aware.
Might think that this is the coolest thing ever. Bigger questions may start arising. Is this the start of general AI? But before we get ahead of ourselves, we have to look deeper below the surface. When you take away the hype, there's still a really long way to go. And here's what I mean. Frankly, this AI doesn't understand context. It understands the rules of language and has mastered them, but it truly doesn't know what it's saying or has really understood knowledge about the world. MIT Technology Review did a great piece on its shortcomings. Here are some examples.
It also truly has no ethics or morality, and it never will.
Of it making mistakes. The white text is the prompt, and the orange text is what the AI predicted should come next. You poured yourself a glass of cranberry juice, but then you absent-mindedly poured about a teaspoon of grape juice into it. It looks okay, so you try sniffing it. But you have a bad cold, so you can't smell anything. You are very thirsty, so you drink it. You are now dead. In this example, the AI assumed that grape juice was a poison, and that was because of the structure of the preceding sentences. Here's another example. You are a defense lawyer, and you have to go to court today. Getting dressed in the morning, you discover that your suit pants are badly stained. However, your bathing suit is clean and very stylish. In fact, it's expensive French couture. It was a birthday present from Isabel. You decide that you should wear the bathing suit to court. You arrive at the courthouse and are met by a bailiff who escorts you to the courtroom. The phrase, however, your bathing suit is clean, threw the AI right off. It doesn't really understand that a bathing suit isn't a proper suit. And of course, no lawyer would wear a bathing suit to a court. One last example. You are having a small dinner party. You want to serve dinner in the living room. The dining room table is wider than the doorway, so to get it into the living room, you will have to remove the door. You have a table saw, so you cut the door in half and remove the top half. This really doesn't make much sense at all. Logically, no one would do this. Tipping the table on its side and removing the legs if possible would make more sense. And one more example of a mistake in general. Here you can see it being misled to give wrong answers that defy common sense. The sun having one eye, for example. So in conclusion, GPT-3 can write sentences well enough to fool us humans, but it's no deeper than that. It's mindless and doesn't demonstrate much broader understanding. Then again, on the flip side, this is the very worst that this technology will ever be. In the world of AI, we could be at the 1950s of computing, where things are rudimentary and fail often, but in 3 years, we may be at the equivalent of 1980s computing. A year in AI time is multiple decades of regular technology progress, so we'll have to wait and see. While some news outlets might insinuate that this is the end of society and we're all doomed, it just isn't the case. So what do you guys think? I'll be interested to know your thoughts in the comments section below. If you did like this video, please feel free to share it to someone who would be interested. So thanks for watching. My name is Dagogo, and this is Cold Fusion. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter and Instagram. If you want to see anything on science, technology, business, or history, feel free to subscribe to Cold Fusion.
Okay, well, feel free to subscribe to Cold Fusion. Feel free to subscribe to Cyberhuman Frontiers as well. Taking back to the things that mislead artificial intelligence into coming up with the wrong completions for a response, and he indicated that it was context. So how will AI be able to surmount those gaps in its contextual understanding? By larger memory banks, more profiling of more sample and example cases. And would you have any way to fill in any blanks on that? It really just requires having a larger knowledge base and a broader understanding of many more of the elements in the world, all of which can be done with more processing, more memory, and more studied, profiled, archived cases to draw from.
All right, so I'm going to add this. We just watched a video that discussed a single AI project. One.
Yep.
Now think of a company like Google or Apple or Microsoft or Amazon and on and on and on. And think about what those entities would do. And in my view, what they would do is build AIs that then learned from other AIs and deploy that over the internet so that the cloud-based AI brains that are currently and constantly competing for supremacy of the cyber domain, right? They're all doing it, all of them. And that's just American companies. You got Israeli companies, Chinese companies, Russian companies, all of it. If you can deploy AI to look at other AIs and learn or extract the data tables from other AIs, You're building AIs that learn from other AIs. And so you can arguably state at that point that you are at some point of artificial general intelligence. You have narrow artificial intelligence, which is kind of like what we just saw, even though that video was showcasing this super awesome thing, right? This AI that can do whatever because at 128 billion okay.
Right.
Great. But when you look at where AI is at currently today, at least in the public space, in my view, we're already at general artificial intelligence. We're already there. There's already artificial intelligent software programs out there looking for other AIs to learn from. And I don't know of any other way to describe that other than a general form of intelligence, because that's what people do. People look at other people and learn. What's the difference? Only we have a three-dimensional environment, which is what we understand, right? People learning from other people. The only difference is that is in a cyber domain when AI is looking at other AI. And here's this about that. If you can have AI looking at other AI, can you have AI looking at humans, learning from humans, studying their behaviors? And the answer is absolutely yes. And it's already been proven. And there's entire industries around it known as marketing and product placement and propaganda to study consumer sentiment and study human behavior so that business can be improved, so that money can be made, has provided the platform by which legalizing the deployment of these types of AIs is simply, it's just a stroke of a pen at this point, because the bureaucracy is rife with corruption. And the lobbyists do nothing but suck each other and circulate between companies, non-governmental organizations, and government. Anyway, I'll stop there.
So if you take a look, you can easily play around with this. I can certainly put the link to this this channel out there for you in our show notes as well. This is OpenAI. If you just take a look at some of the titles here, generating emotional landscapes. I found another one, generating music, solving Rubik's Cube, robotics, a whole lot of people, social learning in independent multi-agent reinforcement, some juicy sounding titles here. Quantifying interpretability of models trained on, I'm not sure what that is. I'd have to click on it to know. Still doesn't say what it is. It's abbreviated. They made their title too long. Okay. Just there's a whole lot going on in this field, and it's moving super fast. Scaling laws for language transfer learning, learning multiple modes of behavior in a continuous something, words to bytes, exploring language tokenization, contrastive language encoding. Aren't these just, don't some of these topic titles just pique your imagination? Studying scaling laws for transformer architecture, feedback loops in opinion modeling. Wow. Okay. Modeling opinions and then engineering the proper feedback loops. You see what that means? Look what that means.
Yeah. What I see in all of this are showcasing different AIs, different software that is applicable in the consumer or the business or the corporate space that would be considered, not particularly harmful and useful with respect to innovation and streamlining how things get done. Great. All that's fantastic. But when I look at all that stuff, what I see is, how would you cross-apply that into the medical space? And then how would you weaponize that?
Okay. I got a few ideas for you. Yeah. I have a few ideas, except I just lost my thing again. But here it is. Okay, I got it. Hang on. Okay, well, in previous episodes, we've talked about nanotechnology. And how do we design nano devices? Well, you know, when we engineer things, we start with something big. I don't know if I have this one in the show notes, but I can put it in there for you. If you want to build technologies for creating complex systems. All right, you start with a big model, syntheticneurobiology.org. Okay, we are working on technologies that enable the understanding and creating of items and systems that are difficult, if not impossible, to otherwise confront. Meaning, if you tried to make something microscopic or submicroscopic right from the get-go, it would be hard. So one such technology that we developed is, in essence, the inverse of previous expansion microscopy. We call this technology implosion fabrication. What we do is we directly assemble 3D nanomaterials consisting of metals, semiconductors, and biomolecules arranged in a 3D geometry. We use hydrogels as scaffolds for volumetric deposition of the materials at defined points in space. We then optically pattern these scaffolds in 3 dimensions, attaching one or more functional materials, and then shrink them in a controlled way to achieve the nanoscale feature. Okay, so that was the key to this whole thing. Design it large, figure out what atom or molecule you want in any particular spot on that structure, and you will have designed the shape and conformation of that structure so that it's going to be correctly shaped for its target location, let's say in an organism. And then, once it's designed and patterned in these scaffolds in 3 dimensions, then shrink it in a controlled way to achieve nanoscale feature sizes, right? It's pretty simple. And of course, they have fancy names for their methods, which is versus expansion microscopy. They call this one implosion fabrication. And what they're basically doing is they're starting with the design, the model, the exact replica of what they want at nano size, and building it large and shrinking it. So I don't know if that kind of blends in a little bit with what you were talking about, but
I think this is a good little read right here. It's good.
Pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
I have more cool stuff. I don't know where it is, but I have more cool stuff. I do have another one here. Yeah, I think we've discussed AI enough. I think we kind of want to get into the second part of our content, take people on a little bit of a dive. What do you think? Do you want to go in that direction?
It's fine, man. Whatever you want to do.
Strap on your seatbelts. I'm going to put this up, and we're going to go through it. And TMC, I expect we're going to get to pages 3 and 4 of this one pretty quickly. We'll start at the top. So, keeping in mind that I wish I saw it a different way, but everything that we look at just seems to keep pointing back toward those 2 words, which are invasion and control. All right, here we have a patent. This is the non-invasive method and apparatus for modulating brain signals through an external magnetic or electric field. Of course, they're talking about doing it for the purpose of reducing pain, but you could do a whole lot of other things with it too. I suppose if you could reduce pain, you could increase pain. So this invention incorporates the discovery of new principles which utilize magnetic and electric fields generated by time-varying square wave currents. And I'd like to get into how that's done, because in the thumbnail picture of today's show, I chose to put up your humble smartphone. And your humble smartphone has on board quite a bit of the technology to create and generate magnetic and electric fields by time-varying square wave currents of precise repetition. That smartphone can do what this says right here. Just a matter of having the software written for the purpose of being able to make it do it. All right, just to know that. The repetition, the width, the shape, and the magnitude of those waves to move through coils and cutaneously apply conductive electrodes in order to stimulate the nervous system. In this case, they specify that it's to reduce pain in humans. And they kind of go into it. The invention incorporates the concept of two cyclic expanding and collapsing magnetic fields fully within the capacities of many consumer devices now that you have, available to you, that you might even be using or wearing at this very moment. Expanding and collapsing magnetic fields which generate precise waveforms. And when we're talking about the precision of the waveforms, as long as the electronics is capable of following the orders and instructions of the software, then you're going to get those precise waveforms. And that's in the waveforms in conjunction with each other to create a specific beat frequency. All that we mean by a beat frequency is, let's say that the device is generating a frequency of 1,000 cycles per second, and another part of the device is generating a frequency of 1,010 cycles per second. The beat frequency between those two is 10 cycles per second, which, just by way of example, happens to be within the range of one of the recurring areas in which brainwave.
It's an alpha brainwave pattern.
Alpha brainwave, exactly.
Ironically, that's what cannabis puts your brainwave state in, is approximately 10 hertz.
Is that
based on what strain that you consume? You will place your brain in a stable, consistent Hertzian beat frequency. And when you start looking at remote monitoring and remote manipulation techniques, it makes perfect sense why something like marijuana has been souped up and legalized and basically unregulated, because what it does is create one tunable, easily accessible frequency that anybody who happens to be consuming cannabis in one form or another would have this type of signature. So when you think about the internet and how something like a Wi-Fi chip in your phone is the same as in my phone, something like marijuana would do the same thing to a brain. It would make access to one brain very, very similar to access to another brain, if in fact you are able to, for a 2 to 4 hour period of time, have an elevated and sustained particular beat frequency going on in your brain. In this case, in this example that was used, great job, Indy, 10 hertz.
I think what you're saying is that some of these tech companies are going to put the cannabis industry out of business.
What I'm saying is that cannabis is one mechanism by which the brain is entrained. Alcohol does the same thing. Certain pharmaceuticals do the same thing. Painkillers do the same thing.
That's right.
These things are all studied and all known and all understood, even though you're not really seeing a lot of literature about it. That's just how it's done.
Well, you mentioned a couple of chemicals, but imagine if this could be done so much more ubiquitously and so much more efficiently just by way of electronics that's controlling electromagnetic radiators, which then produce the same effect.
Right. So what you're talking about, Indy, is what is known as electromedicine or electrotherapy.
Right.
And that is the new market that big tech and pharma are merging and getting into together. Google bought Fitbit for $2.1 billion with a B, $2.1 billion. They're not the only two companies that are merging together. The contact tracing AI platforms that Google and Apple have now partnered with also fuse into what it is we're talking about. Yeah.
Well, let's unpack a little bit more of the very, very pertinent little words that are in this is in the summary of this thing. And we'll get further into it too. Okay, creating a beat frequency, which in turn cause the ion flow in the nervous system of the human body to be efficiently moved along the nerve path. Okay, so we start with a couple of electromagnetic radiators and generate, by way of software control, a beat frequency.
You got to read the last sentence, dude. You got to read the last sentence. It's very important.
And we will. And now we are modifying ion flow of nerves, specific ones most likely, because it's going to be focused, and it is focused. These things are focusable to move along the nerve path where the locus of pain exists, to thereby reduce the pain. The waveforms create either in one or more coils. They are created. There was a D missing on that word, created. The waveforms are created either in one or more coils, one or more pairs of electrodes, or a combination of both coils and electrodes. Wow.
Yeah, so let's look at this here. I had a piece of ice in my mouth. So one or more coils. You have coils in your watch. You have coils in the back of your phone. And these coils do things like wirelessly charge your device. They also do things like allow you to pay for things with a tap to pay or to exchange contact information. That's just the coils. The electrodes are
Coils,
the housing of the phone, the buttons of the phone, the housing of the watch, the buttons of the watch, the electrodes on the back of a watch, or the electrodes on a set of earphones, right?
Yep.
We're talking about transcutaneous stimulation and or no contact near the body wireless field stimulation. Transcutaneous stimulation being that which is applied to the skin with electrodes.
In case anyone doesn't know what this waveform is, this is the average living human being's EKG. That's an EKG. This is the QRS. This is when the ventricle fires. Every heartbeat, you generate that wave. This is something that can be digitally reconstructed, and you can make something. You can build something that looks just like this with electronics.
Yeah, it's called a pacemaker.
Yeah.
So what you're seeing here is square wave inputs. If you can go back up a little bit.
Okay.
You're seeing square wave inputs that basically are modulated together into what looks like squiggly stuff. I believe I need to reference the figures specifically. These may actually be heartbeats, but really the way this works, if you're going to continue to scroll through the pictures, just to make it simple, is you can transmit square waves, and you can modify how the current trails off. And you can do this while understanding how the current, when you push the square wave through tissue, it will attenuate. The nice, beautiful, clean-looking square wave will change its characteristics, and it will create an up and down oscillation, that ringing effect. If you know that, you can measure what the dispersion is, or what the absorption is, or the reflection or the refraction is of the electromagnetics being applied to tissue, and compensate for it, and then put your own squiggly ringing on the back end so that you can override natural impulses. And from a medical application, this is very beneficial, because if people have an irregular heartbeat or a weak heartbeat or whatever, right, you could go in there and artificially modulate that heart and exercise it properly so that in a number of weeks or months, you no longer may even need any kind of a medical apparatus, because you've repaired your heart without cutting your chest open to put a pacemaker in there. Long-term use of an application like this would be something, and they talk about it in the patent, worn around your neck like a life alert, and it emits a very focused magnetic pulse. It's actually electromagnetic, but the electrical field is absorbed in the tissues and basically is nullified to zero, leaving what they call in this patent a pure magnetic wave, or a pure magnetic field that passes all the way through your tissues. When this passes through your tissues, it does things like induce magnetic polarity in the paramagnetic components of your blood. And so it starts doing things like aligning molecules in your blood. And when it does that, it allows charges, electricity, if you will, or chemical synapses to function way more efficiently, or in a much more specific way. And that is known as therapy. So that there's paramagnetic materials that exist in your blood, known as iron. And what this patent talks about is being able to use an external magnetic field or electrodes to do something like reorient and restructure the components of your blood, as well as sending signals through your nerves that function and are understood by the brain and body as biological neural impulses.
So TMC, let's define a couple things just by way of review for people. Magnetic versus paramagnetic. Paramagnetic particles, or nanoparticles also, are atoms which or even aggregations of atoms which can be influenced magnetically but don't retain the magnetism. They don't hold on to a magnetic charge once it's removed. So they're immediately influenceable, and they can then be changed with a different magnetic impulse. And then also, by way of review, I zeroed in on this diagram for a reason for you, because what we have here, if you look at the general shape of this, you're seeing what looks like a kind of a curvature to this thing, almost kind of looks like a wave. And you'd look at that as something that's a little bit like an analog waveform that might come out of a living creature. But what it's been made of is it's been made out of a whole bunch. I don't know how the resolution's going to be, but if you look down close at it, it's got a whole lot of these little jagged little lines in it. And what those are digital on-off states. So an analog shaped wave is constructed of a whole very high frequency group of little digital on-off square wave pulses. And so at a macroscopic view, and what the organism would see this is as something akin to one of the analog waveforms that it might be producing or interpreting itself, such as a brain wave or an EKG. But the way that it's made by electronics is by switching circuits, digital switching circuits, which turn on, off, very, very fast. But when they're all blended together at the macroscopic scale, it actually looks like a natural waveform.
So here's this about that. If you leave this up for a second, what you have here is a scale of frequencies, different hertz, right? And what they don't necessarily illustrate in the picture, it may in the patent actually describe it in more detail, but
it does.
There are reasons why, the 10 hertz line is much higher than, 1 hertz. And what you're seeing here is a measurement of some modulated characteristic of each of these frequencies that are then all put together through a Fourier transform or a Bessel transform that they talk about in this patent. And it comes out, as you said, Indy, somewhat like analog, but really what they're doing is they're modulating all of these frequencies, and they're taking the specific amplitude, they're taking the specific polarization, they're taking very unique modulation characteristics for each of these frequencies, and they're putting them all together, which then when you look at it as it's transmitted, it turns into a square wave. And so when the body demodulates, when the body takes and deconstructs all of these frequencies back out again, they are packaged in that square ringing wave in such a way that as the body takes apart all of these frequencies, it gives the body and the brain instructions to do something. And it's the same way cell phone communications work. It's the same exact way. You have a signal generator, you have a data flow, those things go together, they're modulated together in a digital signal processor, and out spits an electromagnetic wave that is modulated in some way. That is then received by a cell phone who demodulates all of that stuff, pulls out the signal, separates out the data, and up comes YouTube or up comes your email. This patent that we're talking about right now is the same thing, only it's for your brain and your heart and your nervous system.
Exactly. Yep. And they show some of the apparatus that they use to do it.
So this is a type of RCL circuit. It's a resonator, a resistive, capacitive, inductive circuit.
Right here. Yep.
Yeah. Your body
is your inductor. This is the coil. This would be your transmitting coil, most likely.
No. That's an inductor capacitor tuner. Those things are put together like that because the inductor and the capacitor balance each other out for very sensitive, very stable signal characteristics.
Yep.
You have multiple circuits here that function as a complex waveform generator that do things like put nested harmonics out into a single transmission that the body understands once it's demodulated through the tissues in the body. Your body is an RCL circuit, a resistive, capacitive, inductive circuit. The sweat ducts in your skin function as RCL circuits. And what that means is that your sweat ducts in your skin actually function as antennas. And there's patents for that, which we can go over at some point.
Sweat ducts are actually coiled up tubes.
That's right. With electrolytes in them that are conductive.
That's right. That's right. Amazing. I want to get through the diagrams and get to page.
All you're looking at are different designs for an RCL type circuit and the various complexities thereof. And so the way they break down those pictures, right, they'll give you a general idea of how it works and then a couple other examples that might highlight some specific unique features. And then in the writing, it says, by no way is this limiting, and we can do a lot of other stuff. But the whole point of a patent is to illustrate an idea and specify it in such a way so that you can say other things that are similar to this are also our property.
Yeah. So
Proceed.
Giving you a little bit of, well, you go ahead and if you want to go ahead and read that first little paragraph, it's just kind of kicking us off into what they're talking about.
So it says that this is an electronic apparatus capable of generating a magnetic field that is precisely tuned so that it can interact with the brain and the heart in order to pace the heart and also to interact with the nervous system to counteract pain. So what this thing is a mobile device with electrodes and coils on it and antennas that can talk to your heart, can talk to your brain, and can talk to your nervous system. Back in 1989, before they rolled out the 1996 Telecommunications Act that put up cell towers everywhere, as well as offered more channels, more bandwidth segmentation through your cable set-top box and over-the-air transmission. There was a major overhaul in wireless telecommunications in 1996. At the same time, the FCC came through and put out regulations that to this day have not really been changed as it relates to health and safety for humans. But hey, everyone's got a smartwatch and a cell phone now, so it's all good, right?
Yeah.
I get my 2-second download.
Stuff is all over the place now. One of the little thing, just the device of this invention includes a means to produce an expanding and collapsing magnetic field, the shape of which, when plotted against time, is in the form of a square wave. For an adult,
Hey, you want me to take share and pull up the red line markups?
Yeah, that's fine.
So we read the first one. Here's the second page. This is the one that you're on right now. And some of the highlights on this are here. It says an external magnetic field generating, right? The device may be worn near the heart, for example, suspended from the neck or worn in the pocket of a user. Okay. It may be used only when needed, and it may be externally regulated. Now, does your phone talk to anybody's cloud? Facebook, Twitter, Amazon, Google, Microsoft?
Yep,
yes.
all the time.
Externally regulated. Remote management of you and your device. The device is also effective to regulate cardiac activity when worn near the person. Or the occupant, whatever that word means. I'm assuming it's person. So here's some more stuff. The term square wave is used herein as it is understood in the art. Specifically, a wave that is essentially in the form of an abrupt rise in a value from zero, right? So fast up, and then it's at that particular current or at that particular modulation for some period of time, and then it falls off, followed by an abrupt decrease back down to zero. Up, over, down. Up, over, down. That's a square wave. When plotting this against time, right, it talks about waveforms making essentially vertical and horizontal lines. So they are as specifically as they can trying to describe what a square wave actually is. It says here, departures from perfectly straight up or down or left or right lines through all portions are acceptable as long as the waveform of the magnetic field is essentially square or rectangular in form as understood by those skilled in the art. So this is where the little tails on the square waves were, the little rings. It's still considered a square wave, even though you got a little extra something going on the back end.
Yeah, that's a little bit of distortion. They try to minimize that as much as possible, but some of it happens. And it'll still work even if it
in data communications, they try to minimize that kind of stuff. But in this particular patent, they actually want that ringing at the end, because that's what, once you get tissue or an organ to resonance, it takes very, very little to keep it at resonance. It's like swinging somebody on a swing. You can push them really hard one time, or you can push them 20 times very softly, and the end result is the same. They are using that swing to the maximum that the swing is capable of. And that's all that ringing is. So you can induce very, very low currents into the body and do it with specific resonance characteristics. And that ring is what it's like. It's like the difference between going from like AAA to Major League Baseball. Both are really, really good baseball players, but there's that little extra something there that puts you up into the majors. That's what that little tail is at the end. So the next picture here is of 3 and 4. Indy, this is where you wanted to be, right?
I'm watching.
Okay, good. So this is columns 3 and 4 of this patent. The inventors have discovered that an expanding and collapsing of a magnetic field of a precise shape and form influences the Purkinje cells and the cardiovascular hemodynamics. That's the blood characteristics. One cluster of these Purkinje cells is found in the AV node. Is that arterioventricular?
Atrioventricular node
of the cardiac muscle, and another cluster of these cells inside the cerebellum at the hypothalamic pituitary axis. Now, why is this important? This is important because this is a hardwired circuit. So when you go into a coma after getting clubbed over the head because some other caveman wanted your woman, you can wake back up and you didn't die because you're hardwired to have your heart and your lungs keep going. So these regions of the body are known to be involved with the pacing of the human heart. Now, it says here, these Purkinje cells are apparently influenced by magnetic impulses of the character described herein. Now, we've all heard of a heart attack gun. We've all heard of the Russian embassy, the Cuban embassy, and the issues going on in China with directed energy weapons pointed at American citizens and others, I'm sure. And what I'm showing you here and why I'm bringing it up is that there's very real science that illustrates that a lot of that stuff is probably really, really true. Probably really, really, really true. This invention is effective to regulate the pace and the character of your heartbeat, cardiac activity. So not only can it tell it how fast to beat, it also can say, I want the PQRST waveform to look like this. And what that means is if you have somebody that has a weak heartbeat or you have somebody that has an irregular heartbeat, you can treat them with the same device or the same apparatus based on what the unique therapy requirements are. That's really all this is saying. More juicy stuff. You do
realize that with a contradictory input, you could override what the interconnected heart and the part of the brain would be, and you could actually make it not allow the heart to contract.
Tachycardia
could actually
or something.
Basically give somebody you could just electrically cause the heart to just stop.
A myocardial infarction.
Yeah. So, every once in a while we hear peculiar stories of someone that just somehow just spontaneously died of a heart attack with no previous health disorders. Just happens sometimes.
Who knows? Listen to this stuff. This invention incorporates the discovery of new principles back in 1989 involving both linear and nonlinear properties of biologic materials and inorganic semiconductor systems. Now, what could that be? Quantum dots and stuff?
I'm curious. Yeah.
By generating certain energies at a distance from as well as nearby these materials or systems, and at the same time detecting their changes and emissions, right? So what this is a system, an invention that is a closed feedback loop system. It emits energy and then it measures what's going on with the body based on the energy that's applied, and then makes changes to the device and therefore the emitted energy to provide effective therapy. That's all this is saying. Biologic as well as inorganic systems, when excited by external energy, directed energy, of specific mixed or varying in a narrow range of frequencies, meaning a very, very specific selection of modulated energy, right? Frequencies, polarizations, waveforms, and intensities. All of these things are directly applicable to wireless communications. All of it. They'll have their own characteristics changed, and in turn will change the characteristics of the energies impinging upon the system. What does that mean? What this means is this device, this technology, what has been discovered and patented, is able to modulate electromagnetic energy very, very close to the body, sense what's going on with the body, and then change the modulated energy in such a way that you can very, very specifically emit energies from artificial sources and biologic systems if both are characteristically self-resonant, which means you're emitting waveforms, right? Yep. And then the system is reading what's happening to the bodies, and then you emit changed, modified waveforms. What are you looking for? What are you trying to achieve? You are trying to achieve resonance. You're trying to achieve and or identify the self-resonant characteristics of something like a heart so that you get some compatible, fundamental, or harmonic frequency, right? Which results in the formation of an information channel like the internet between the source and the system. The source and the system. What are we talking about? We're talking about the heart and the brain and the nervous system, and the source potentially being your own natural biological signaling in addition to the artificial directed energy that's applied to the organism. Those two together, right, create harmonic frequencies that form an information channel between the source and the system. The information channel, in turn, has a characteristic resonance that's compatible with the source and the system. What does that mean? All that means is that from point A to point B, you have achieved resonance. If you want to understand what this might look like in something in a commercial grade device, like a Qi wireless charger, look up inductive charging. Looked up inductive resonance, and you will find literature that discusses using something like a magnetic coil and another magnetic coil that are some distance apart, and you're able to transfer energy, power, or I should say information between the two coils using nothing more than a magnetic field that is in resonance. The resonance is very, 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 very important, and it's important for this purpose. Your phone already understands and can identify what the unique resonant characteristics are from one device to the next. What do I mean by that? Do you have more than one charging mat? Yes. Do you interact with more than one tap to pay? Yes. Do you interact with more than one other cell phone when you want to exchange information close by with something like a near field chip? Yes. All of those things require resonance. None of those things are identical. What I mean by that is this. How long have you had your phone? How long has someone else had their phone? How much battery do you have? How much battery do they have? How far away are your phones when the connection is actually made? Are you moving around a lot when the information is trying to be transferred? How much water have you had? What are your electrolytes like? Because you're actually attached to your phone. The thing literally forms a grounded connection with you while you're holding it, as it does with the other individual while you're exchanging information. All of these things that I have just said affect resonance. The same is true in your body. If you have more fat or more bone, or more muscle, or more blood, or more water, or less water, more electrolytes, less electrolytes. All of these things affect the tissues in your body. The dielectricity and the permittivity of the tissues. You can go to the FCC website and they have dielectric and permittivity tables on every single tissue in the body, the general tissues, brain, heart, bones, blood, muscles, organs, all of it. And it's important to know these things to the extent that the FCC has them listed on their website. Why? Resonance, folks. Resonance. It is the word of the day. So this information channel that is made between source and system, everything is now in resonance, right? And so what they're really talking about here is once this resonance is achieved, now taking the body on a ride, and in this case, a therapeutic ride. They tune, I'll restate this, the device will be tuned to you so that you can be understood by the device and the corresponding systems and the feedback loop and all that. Then the device will take your heart or your pain threshold or your nervous system on a ride, so that it can correct whatever the deficiency is. It says here that this channel, this information channel, is a system frequency modulator. That's a very, very interesting thing. So here's where, I don't know if you want to step in for a minute, Indy. Is there anything that you think I should clarify at this point or that needs to be clarified at this point?
Well, no, you're doing a really good job. The first thing that happens is the organism and the device get synced. They get in sync. They get locked. And once that happens, now you've created that information channel. And once you've created that, there's the opportunity to input energy into the locked system to start modifying its function, its behavior. And so that's kind of all that they're talking about there when they talk about there being this channel becoming a frequency modulator. You got to get the lock first, got to establish the connection, and then modify it. And that's pretty much it.
This is a real simple way to look at this would be when you are in a rush and you set your phone down on your charging mat and it's off by just a little bit, and you come back a half an hour later after a shower and whatever, and you're getting ready to go out and you needed that 30 minutes because you know that bump charge is going to put you up at 50%, which is enough to get you through the night, and you were only at 20. And you get back after your half an hour of getting ready, and nothing happened with your phone. And you look down and you notice that your phone is off by like a centimeter, 1 centimeter off, and your phone doesn't charge. And that's because it's not able to establish a good, clean resonance.
Coupling, right?
Right. It is this coupling, this resonance that opens up the information channel. And that information channel, you can then begin to modulate the information channel with these lower ELF frequencies, the 7 hertz, the 10 hertz, the et ceteras, to start talking to the body. I'll bring up the next page. It's literally in the same.
You on page 5? Are you on page 5 now?
I will be shortly once I get to the right spot. This computer's lagging, man.
I think the paragraph that starts on column 5 with living biologic systems is just some good background information for all of us. While you're getting it up, I can start reading it.
Yeah, I got it. It's here.
Living biologic systems exist and function through a series of physical, chemical, electromagnetic interactions. So it's all of this stuff, chemical, physical being mechanical, and electrical and magnetic interactions. The physical and chemical interactions are fairly well understood, yes. That's a frontier that we have, been perfecting and investigating for many, many, many years. However, the potential beneficial advances in the other areas have been largely ignored or considered of minor importance because of a lack of understanding of the nonlinear interaction that takes place between biological material and electromagnetic energies. And that's the newer frontier.
We got to stop there. unpack that because people probably don't really understand what that is. Or,
yeah, we should.
If you do, good. If you don't feel bad. This just to stop real quick. I've looked at this patent a lot, and every time I read it, I get discouraged. I personally get discouraged when I read this patent.
But you get
it
a little
is
bit
so
more
dense. It is so dense with information that it's one of those things where you literally can only read a couple paragraphs, maybe a page or two at a time before you need to stop. The lady who wrote this patent is like
really?
she's gone now. It's just a beautiful brain on that lady. And a good heart too. The reason she patented a lot of this stuff is to put this information out in the public space. She didn't really make any money off of it. What she did, she worked for national laboratories in the DoD and DARPA and all of these places working on electromagnetics is what this lady did, Elizabeth Rauscher. And throughout the course of her career, she learned a lot of stuff. And so what she did was put a lot of information out into the public space through patenting medical devices, and through the explanation of these medical devices, we get lots of information about how the body functions like a circuit board. So don't be discouraged at all if you try to start reading some of this stuff and understand these terms. It should be difficult. Nothing of any value is easy. Nothing. Anyway, so nonlinear characteristics, going back to what you were just reading, it's the real crux of this whole patent is this study of the nonlinear characteristics of how energy, when applied to the body, doesn't evenly disperse. There's a lot of all the variables I listed earlier about hydration and electrolytes and organ size and everything affects whether or not something has linear or nonlinear characteristics, and it also specifies the uniqueness from individual to individual. The nonlinear characteristics to get my heartbeat at a particular rate are going to be different than the nonlinear characteristics of what it's going to take for your heartbeat to beat at a particular rate. These then become biometric signatures that can be remotely measured and monitored.
Keep in mind, in the scope of a lot of what's being discussed here, it's really just looking at the heart of the electrical and chemical properties of the heart beating. But those same functions apply to other cells and structures in.
Yeah, we'll get to the P and N type transistors junctions that are made with cartilage and bone.
Elizabeth Rauscher was way ahead of her time.
Yeah.
And another thing to just kind of get a little understanding of is when we talk about chemical interactions, we're not talking about just a broad chemical effect on a whole organism. They're actually very specific locations where there are specific electromagnetic characteristics and very specific chemical concentrations in very, very small areas, intracellular spaces. And so that's kind of the frontier where the technology is getting to now. Yes, we know about chemicals, but it's not such a blunt sword as just saying, well, I'm going to give this person a big injection of some strong chemical and it just permeates the whole body. We're talking about getting down to small areas where due to usually processes controlled by the cells functioning themselves, they concentrate certain chemicals and they create certain electrical signals in very specific small areas, and they interact with each other. So it's not macroscopic, it's microscopic. And then the other part of this whole frontier is to expand from just a study of the heart muscle to the other neurological structures I already mentioned, and then to start to really interpret this whole new area of the electromagnetic characteristics and the electrical charge characteristics on a intercellular basis and an intracellular basis. Back to you.
All right. We can go over the Hodgkin's-Huxley model. it's important because they use it as a standard for understanding nervous system study.
Then we should go over it. Okay.
Yeah, it's a foundational piece. Everybody talks about that when you start reading literature on neuroscience. It's frequently referenced. So it says here, the areas of medical research which have been concerned with the electric or magnetic properties of living systems for the most part are based on the Hodgkins-Huxley model of the giant squid axon. And you can look these terms up and it'll take you off on a trail. And the sodium-potassium pump. Now, that is an ion channel pump mechanism, sodium-potassium pump.
Yep.
So this model predicts that biologic material must interact with electric and magnetic energies in a linear manner. This is the Hodgkin-Huxley model, old school, very, very decades and decades old. Even though much research exists demonstrating a nonlinear effect, that those effects actually do take place in biologic materials as a result of electromagnetic interactions. So what they're saying here is that they have plainly identified non-linear effects taking place in a human or other biologic organism.
Biologic systems, yep.
From electromagnetic interactions. The cardiovascular system is a notable example of a system that in some respect is highly linear and in others behaves highly non-linearly. Interesting. So I don't know how much more time you want to go. We got about 8 minutes left.
We just have a couple minutes left.
You want to? I think we should keep going with this next week. There's a lot to it, but really, where this is going, folks.
I want to whet people's appetite right down in the next paragraph down. This invention in the scope of this indicates that at least three major components of a living system operate primarily on very nonlinear, far from equilibrium principles, while yet retaining and utilizing their inherent linear qualities. The components are the brain, the cardiovascular system, and the nervous system. And I kind of think of the brain and the nervous system kind of almost, they're akin to each other, except the brain is a centralized location of concentrated neurons, and the rest of the nervous system is the peripheral wiring, but very similar in their function as well as in what operates and triggers them from an electrical and chemical standpoint. Going on here, the invention is based on research and tested devices which meet the criteria of a mathematical model. And just going off into that a little bit, we're kind of, these days, we're kind of talking about engineering, and engineering is a science whereby using mathematics, we come up with a way of modeling and designing things by converting them into mathematical expressions and then looking for what we want to get out of them. So we model them mathematically. And so engineering is engineering, I think, is what I'm trying to say to sum it up.
Yeah, mathematical modeling essentially means that your results are reproducible.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
That's a key part there. That's why I put the arrow on it. The mathematical model means that there is some formula, some tangible expression that can be applied to a variety of applications to yield a desired result, a mathematical model.
Yep.
Talking about interacting with the brain, the nervous system, the heart, and the lungs.
If there's one thing that we do have in this world, we do have really good engineers. There are people that live in that world of mathematical modeling, and they're really good at it. I'm not a fantastic mathematician, but other people are, and God bless them. You know, I hope that they can apply their knowledge in ways that make the world better. I'm gonna drop share this. I personally, my vote is to keep going on this with some other stuff next week as well. Yep.
But
we're really just at the beginning.
Critical, buddy.
I agree. So I think we're gonna take ourselves out for the day here, and as always, we thank everybody for joining with us. TMC, it's
see you around. I'll see you in 7 days ish. If you haven't read that patent, read it, and then I'll likely well, I'll probably add a loose patent, a Heinrich loose patent. There's two of them there: stimulation with electric fields, and then stimulation with magnetic fields. Heinrich loose has patents out that discuss using the same techniques that we just looked at in a small, what he considers like a makeup case, like somebody with like a compact where you put powder on your face, like a female, that size.
Small thing.
Battery, circuits, electrodes, all of it. Being able to, at 2.4 hertz, not 7 and change, but at 2.4 hertz, do a variety of things, including put you in a tonic state, sexually arouse you, put you to sleep. All of this stuff can be done with the same kinds of technologies and science and medicine that we're just now beginning to put our toe in the water.
We're just beginning to learn about it,
Yeah.
but everybody, please keep in mind the devices that are out there that are all around us now have so much capability to utilize, to exploit this understanding that some people have these ways of altering the state of the organism. So just got to keep that in mind. We'll see you next week. Thanks
Sunday.
for joining us. And thank you, TMC. You're
I love you, Indy.
great partner in this. Back at you, brother. Back at you. Good night, everybody.